Chicago, known for its Chicago-style hot dogs, deep dish pizzas, jazz music, dance and theatrics, and 1920s gangsters like Al Capone, is a beautiful city and is recognized as the third largest city in the United States, just under New York City and Los Angeles. The Windy City is located in the northern section of Illinois on the shores of Lake Michigan and is populated largely by Chicagoans of the white American and African American backgrounds. This accent is a division of the Inland Northern Dialect that covers the geographic band reaching from central New York westward along the Erie Canal, through much of the U.S. Great Lakes region, to eastern Iowa. The most innovative inland northern accents are spoken in Chicago, Milwaukee, Detroit, Cleveland, Buffalo, Rochester, and Syracuse.
Linguists classify the Chicago accent as one of several types of inland northern English. This dialect appears across the U.S. Great Lakes region, which extends from central New York through parts of Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Iowa. Although the vowel shift is often associated with the Chicago accent, some linguists believe it actually originated in the eastern United States in the late 1800s. William LeBove, a linguist and vowel shift expert at the University of Pennsylvania, believes this trend may have started during the construction of the Erie Canal, which brought thousands of immigrants from east to the west. Migrants from all over the northeastern U.S. came to the rapidly industrializing Great Lakes area in the decades after the Erie Canal opened in 1825. LeBove suggested this hypothetical dialect mixing event that preceded the northern city shift occurred by 1860 in upstate New York.
You will mostly hear the Chicago urban dialect spoken within the confinements of the great city, and there are regions within Chicago where the dialect branches off and creates its own unique sound. One will find that white Americans populate the north side, African Americans populate the south side, and some people of Italian and Irish backgrounds populate the west side of Chicago. The north side Chicago accent has a more nasal quality than that of the south side. However, folks from the south side have a more pronounced use of the open O sound, turning the open O in the word cops into more of the ash sound heard in caps. The west side Chicago dialect is said to be much thicker even compared to the north and south sides. Despite these facts, the southern accent has influence on those who live in the south and west sides of Chicago, seeing as people from these regions still use the word y'all, whereas those from the north side are more likely to use language such as yous or yous guys. Interestingly, those who live in the suburbs of Chicago do not have an accent quite as rich as those who live elsewhere in the city. The influence of Chicago tends to dominate the cultural landscape of Illinois. Not many people know that Chicago is a major center for the arts. In the 1910s and 20s, the city was a hub of literary activity. Before the development of the Hollywood film industry, beginning about 1910, Chicago was the center of American movie making. The city's theatrical community offered and still offers a broad spectrum of standard and new and experimental ideas regarding theater. Dance and art are also large community interests in Chicago, as well as jazz and blues music. If you were to take a stroll through downtown Chicago, you would hear the soothing sound of live jazz and blues music coming from each restaurant you pass, with the occasional spoken word performance coming from a local coffee shop or downtown library. The great workers from the South into the industrial cities brought traditional jazz and blues music to Chicago, resulting in Chicago blues and Chicago-style Dixieland jazz.
The vowel shift reflects raising of the ash, fronting of the lowercase a, lowering of the open O, and backing of the turn V wedge, epsilon, and small capital I. The shift occurs in a clockwise rotation so that the fronted production of lowercase a and the back production of epsilon causes them to both be produced more centrally in the oral cavity. The ash is produced higher and more forward in the mouth. This causes ah to be produced more forward in the mouth so that the word hot would be produced similar to hat, and cot would be produced more like cat. Another well-known reflection of Chicago dialect revolves around the D sound. The TH sound found in words like this, that, and there turns into a soft D sound which becomes dis, dat, and dare.
The most prominent vowel change is the elongated script A. Another phonetic difference is the pronunciation of the word the. The th sound, is omitted and replaced by d. This begins a stereotype of all Chicagoans saying "da Bears." Chicagoans also omit the ch sound in pitcher. They replace it with the ch sound, causing the pronunciation of pitcher in Southern American English to sound like pitcher.
When I call for my mother at home, I used to call for my ma, not my mom. In Chicago, we do this weird thing, and I think you guys do this too in Michigan, where you would put a strange S on the end of places, a possessive S. For instance, in Chicago, we would go to the Jewels, or go to the Krogers, or go to the Kmart. In Chicago, we have this strange saying called over by. We go over by someplace. We go over by the car. We go over by the store. And if you're really lazy, you just go over by dare. And that's very common. And then also very common in Chicago lingo is use guys. And that's something I still use all the time. Use guys. Oh, it's great to see you guys. Oh, my goodness.
Compared to other dialects, Chicago also uses different vocabulary. In Chicago, they say pop instead of soda. They also say icebox instead of refrigerator. And when they go to the movies, they say they are going to the show. The first Chicago stereotype is "da Bears." The phrase "the da Bears" is found on many SNL and other comedy shows stereotyping Chicago Bear fans. Another stereotype is people from the East Coast believe they are more intelligent when compared to Chicagoans. This is believed because of the different dialects. A Chicago website also wrote, unquote, "We are all in a mob or a gang. When you call your grandma, it's always, 'I knitted you a bulletproof vest.'" This is the stereotype that everyone in Chicago is in a gang. Another stereotype is that all Chicagoans love the Bears and only care about sports. But as you heard in the beginning of the presentation, Chicago is rich in culture with lively jazz and their storefront theater. The last Chicago stereotype is the belief that everyone who lives in Chicago has a Chicago accent. African American English is also very common in Chicago, with 33% of Chicago population being African American. Though Chicago has many differences in culture and phonology compared to standard American English and other dialects found in America, it is not a substandard form of English.